I'm aware that I need to still detach from my ego. I'm aware that I still need to detach from the perfection. I'm aware that I need to detach from the struggles that I put myself into. Welcome to Declutter For Change podcast. I'm your host, Heather Clark, and on today's episode, we are talking about how to detach. There's certain things that I know a lot of people deal with, and I know I've dealt with it many times over the years of my life, about certain attachments that we do have, whether that's people, things, ideas, or attachment to our ego and our struggles. When I was a kid, there was many things that I was physically attached to. I had my favorite doll or my favorite bear or there was one point where I think I was like 21 years old and I was still attached to these slippers and this pillow that I had. And trust me, on a health spectrum, I never should have been attached to these things. But for whatever reason, I personally was attached to these things. And I know, and it's really funny that I'm bringing this up because I haven't thought about this in years. And if my aunt and uncle ever listened to this podcast, they would be like, oh my God, that was the most disgusting thing in the world. But to them, it was the most disgusting thing in the world because it really was. Like, if you think about the pillow and what our pillows actually have in them and the amount of, anyways, we're not going to go into that because I'm probably going to gross myself out and you. But I was attached to this pillow. And the reason why I was attached to this pillow is because I was going through a time in my life that I struggled a lot with. So I was probably, I think it was like 2021. And I had just gotten over the fact that not only was I moving from place to place, because at the time my mom had actually decided to leave the country and I was living with her at the time. I think it was like a year prior to. And I'd said to her, I was like, what am I supposed to do? And she's like, that's up to you to decide. And I was like, okay, great. And I was going through, so I had just finished my first year of college. I was trying to go into second year. There was a lot of things that were going on that I was going through. So this pillow reminded me, and the smell of it, the feel of it, the attachment I had to it was something that was comforting. Or so I believed. I was so attached to that idea, that smell or that feeling or hanging on to it or sleeping with that pillow, despite how gross it actually was. I attached those feelings and I attached myself to that thing. And there are so many times, like how many times do we have a child when they're babies, they have their blankies or they have their toy. My kids both have their things that they quote unquote are attached to, but we don't let them get to a point where they're so gross. We wash them often enough and all that stuff. But the thing is, it's an attachment because it gives us those feelings. It gives us that memory. It gives us that comfort in times of turbulence or in times of change or in times of the ish is hitting the fan. And that's the one thing that we can attach to and that we can use as our comfort. So one of the things that I learned, and it was funny because I remember vividly just all of a sudden completely saying, F this, I'm done. My aunt and uncle had bugged me about it enough times that I literally threw the pillow and the slippers out in the garbage. It wasn't until I did that, shut the thing, that such an overwhelming feeling came from me once I finally detached from those items. We're talking like, 17 years later, almost 18 years later, and I can not necessarily feel those feelings of how uplifting it was or how different the feeling was when I detached from it, but I remember just that feeling of, what the heck am I doing? And that feeling has followed me throughout my life when I finally detached from certain things, detaching from relationships that were no longer serving me. And just once I finally made that decision, once I finally made that connection to, am I doing, attaching myself, attaching my worth, attaching who I am to this person, to this relationship. When I detached from it, that's when I was like, whoa, And I got closer to who I was and what I wanted. And this includes detaching the idea of being perfect as well. That's something I'm still learning to deal with right now. But there's so many times where, let's say even on a social media post, where I'd be like, no, that doesn't sound right. And I would delete the whole thing. Or I would make a graphic, and because it wasn't perfect, it never got out into the world. I've been going through that one on such a strong level and do you need this to be perfect or do you need this to be public? That's the biggest thing that I've said to myself lately, because I've struggled with my whole life, is the idea of everything being perfect, because I grew up with a mother who looks and the presentation and everything had to be perfect because it was the only thing that she could control. She tried controlling me in that way by showing me that, yes, everything has to be perfect. I had to look perfect. I don't remember the last time I've walked out of this house without makeup on, because that's still the idea of I have to look perfect. I have to have this image. But I'm detaching from that idea of being perfect because it's not serving me. It's not who I am. It's not something that is going to help me in any way. First of all, my perfect is different from your perfect. Your perfect is different from the other person's perfect. So what on earth is this perfection crap that we hold ourselves back with? Why do we hold ourselves in this perfection mindset when in all honesty, there's no such thing as perfect? There really isn't, because we all have a different sense of what perfect means. I'm completely detaching from that because it is not serving me. It is not who I really am at my core. I'm the person who would rather get something out and out in the public. Like I said, am I trying to make it perfect or am I trying to make it public? I'm trying to make things public, and there's many things that I've put out into the world, especially when it comes to the business, that has not been perfect according to my past attachment. And it's okay, because you know what? It's that step closer to who I am, to what I'm getting at. And you know what? I'm put something out and okay, it doesn't work. Great. Let's move on to the next thing. Why didn't it work? What of it didn't work? What could I control and what couldn't I control? The things that I was able to control, I can change. If I wasn't able to control things like how the Facebook algorithm, I can't control that when it comes to organic. Sure, I can do paid advertising, but I'm right now wanting to do organic. I'm detaching from the fact that things have to be perfect. I'm detaching from it because it's not who I really am at my core. I am not somebody who's perfectionist. I am somebody who gets stuff done. That is my thing. That is, I do it now or I don't do it at all. I'm 100% in or I'm 100% out. And that might even be the perfection part that I still need to detach from, because again, I'm finding myself still in that motion of I'm either in or I'm out. And I've got to sit with that and go, okay, what of that do I need to detach from? Is that an ego thing? And I know I absolutely still need to detach from my ego. I'm a human being. I'm still learning. I'm still in my spiritual journey. And I'm nowhere near where I'm at my divine self, my divine feminine. I'm still detaching from my ego to get closer to who I am at my core. That is still something I'm learning. But that's the joy about the journey, is understanding and being aware. Like, I'm aware that I need to still detach from my ego. I'm aware that I still need to detach from the perfection. I'm aware that I need to detach from the struggles that I put myself into. The struggle of perfectionism or the struggles from my past. Why am I still thinking that my struggles when I was a child, or my struggles when I was a teenager, my struggles when I was in my 20s, why am I bringing those forward? Why am I still attached to those? Why have I not detached from them? And I have detached from a lot of them, and I've detached from the relationships, like I said, from the past. But I know that there's still things that I need to do moving forward, because I'm getting closer and closer to who I am really at my core, who I am. Not who people tell me I am, but who I and my higher self knows who I am. And that's what we have to figure out. It's not about what somebody's telling you you should be. It's not about somebody saying, oh, you should do this in your life. Or you should do this for your business. What do you want? What do you feel that you want to do? Who are you at your core, at the most deepest level? Who are you? And when you get to that point, you can detach from the relationships that don't serve you, that don't serve that core you. You can detach from the stuff. Because when we literally detach from the physical stuff, it doesn't matter if it's there or not. It doesn't matter if you have a closet full of clothes that are brand name or from expensive stores, or if it's a bunch of clothes that are from the secondhand store. We detach from the idea of that because we're detaching from the fact that the item is just an item. The item is not what brings us the joy. The item brings us the emotions and the thoughts of what we think we should have, of what we want. So when you have an item and you're thinking, oh, I'm so attached to this thing. No, you're not attached to the thing. You're attached to the emotion that thing brought you or brings you. Let's say there's somebody that has a fancy car, that loves cars, absolutely loves cars, so attached to cars. It's not the car itself that they're attached to. It's what that car represents and what that car brings them emotionally. Does it bring them the attention from people because they're like, ooh, that's a beautiful car. Oh my goodness. And anywhere they go, because it's a flashy color or it's because it's a really expensive sports car or whatever. It's that attention that they're seeking. It's that feeling of being important that they are attached to. It's not the actual vehicle. It's not the actual thing. It's that feeling that whatever that thing is brings you. Another way that I'm learning myself to detach from is detaching from the outcome. Let's say I put a post or I'm doing a launch and I have such an attachment, not right now as much, but before. And I would check how many likes it got, how many comments it had, how many this, how many that. And there's so many people that are attached to the analytics of certain things that they're just putting stuff out to get the numbers. They're not putting stuff out that is actually what they want, what's at their core, what's speaking from their heart. They're speaking from their mind. They're speaking from their mind because their mind is going to get the analytics that their heart thinks it needs. So it's going to get the likes. It's going to get the shares. It's going to get the comments that they think that will bring them that joy, that yes, I'm making it. But when you finally detach from that and go, this is not who I am. Just because 30 people like it or 3,000 people like it doesn't make me any more or any less of a human being, of a spiritual being, than if it got 1 or 0 likes. That detachment from the outcome is critical in this lifetime because there are so many things nowadays that we could totally attach our worth to when it comes to social media, when it comes to posting, when it comes to things we put out into the world. We could totally attach and put our worth into that and saying, I'm not worthy if 8,000 people don't share this. I'm not worthy if it doesn't become viral. What makes it the definition of what you're actually worth? You are here in the human form. You are here on earth. What makes you unworthy of anything? You are worthy just because. That's it. There is no other reason, no other way that you should think that your worth is attached to anything else besides the fact that you are here and that makes you worthy. Beginning, middle, end. So when you finally detach from that outcome of, if only I get this many likes, when you detach from that, the joy that actually comes in, you start to want to put things out, whether people like it or not. Because guess what? Actually, I'm going to say right now, especially on social media, and depending on what your niche is, there are so many people that are reading, watching, listening, etc. from the back end. You'll never know that somebody is watching, or that this one person is watching, that you are helping day in, day out with all the stuff that you put out, because it's coming from your heart. And they'll never like it. I have had so many people PM me saying, thank you for putting that out. And I'm like, what? Who are you, first of all? I've never even seen you. You've never liked any of my posts. But they reached out to me finally after a year or 2 or even 6 months or whatever. I've seen my stuff, even though most of the stuff that they say or they talk about, there's barely any likes. I know for sure that this person hasn't liked it, because obviously you can see who's liked certain things. And it's crazy, because you don't know who's actually watching, but not showing you that they are watching or listening or reading. So please detach from that outcome, detach from the idea that you have to have a certain amount of likes in order for something to happen, that you have to have a certain amount of emails opened for it to be worth your time. If you have it in your heart and your soul that you want to do something, that alone is worth your time. That alone is worth your efforts. That alone may change that one person's life absolutely forever. And that is the reason why you need to do it from the heart and not from the head looking for the numbers. Yeah, sure, go ahead and pay attention to the numbers if you want, for if you're going to run Facebook ads. But when you speak from the heart versus the head, you're going to speak from heart to heart of the person you need to speak to, that is listening, that is maybe not showing you through analytics that they're watching or that they're listening. And that's okay. So when we detach from all these things in our life, the relationships, the idea of perfection, the struggles, the ego, the outcome, like detaching from the outcome, because guess what? When we do things from our core, from our higher self, from who we really are, not who people are telling us we are, that's when the magic happens. That's when we get into the zone where we get into this, it doesn't matter what actually happens. I am detaching from this outcome because you know what? I'm doing this from my heart because this is who I am, what I do, where I'm coming from. And if I can at least help one person, fantastic. This podcast alone, I have detached from the outcome 100%. I want to do this because I need to speak from my heart and make it public, not perfect. Because when I was trying to make it perfect, it didn't happen. When I was originally going to start the podcast, I was going to speak from my head, and it probably wouldn't have resonated with half the people it already has. I have people now reaching out to me privately saying, thank you for doing this. That last podcast episode, I was dealing with this, and this actually helped and made me think about this and that. And it's been great to hear and to see those messages. And it never would have happened had I been talking from my head versus talking to you from my heart. And that's when I realized that I have really started to detach from the idea of my perfectionism. And I'm okay with that. I like that. I like the fact that I'm detaching, because once I detach from the ego and the struggles and fully the attachment from the perfectionism, I'm going to get closer and closer to who I am in my core. And like I said, this is a journey even for me. This change and these energies that are happening right now, as I'm recording this, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of things that I have gone internally with, and realizing that this idea of detaching is a must for human beings to get closer to their spiritual being. That's that for this episode. If you want to join a group of people that are also going through the same thing that you are, that are dealing with these struggles, that are dealing with these attachments and wanting to learn to detach from them, come join us on the Facebook group. It is bit.ly/declutter group. And I look forward to seeing you in there, and we will see you next week. Thank you.